Now, video's not available, but at least they know we're here.
Did you do a sound check?
I didn't do a sound check on you.
Check.
We're here, everybody. Just be a second.
Okay.
Wait. Give me a check again.
Check. Check. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
What's Dan's last name? Danny Bell. D Bell.
We're live, just so you know.
Okay. When are we starting?
As soon as Jake picks up the camera. We have people from Australia, North Carolina, Ahmed's here, Ohio,
Of course, Ahmed's here.
Pennsylvania, Tennessee,
Ahmed wants to be here.
Moosehead Lake, Maine.
Moosehead Lake, really?
Jack Plunkett, you know him?
So stuff.
Moosehead Lake, yeah.
Ken Haygarth is here from the UK.
I can't.
Troy Rader from Orlando, Florida.
Alright, I'm ready.
Hey Troy, if you have any deals on Disney, hook us up, eh?
Who's here from Australia?
Only Wood is the username.
Holy cow.
John from Florida, Paul from Ontario, Ed from Ohio.
Ready?
Whoa.
Alright. Are we
You
ready?
should bring in that salmon. All right, camera's on. We're good?
We're good? Go. Ready?
Yep,
Hi, folks. Welcome. This is number 14, right?
I think so.
14th YouTube workshop. Live. Just get some stuff out of the way that I want to tell you first, announcement-wise. First, check out my new jacket. So Ahmed came to the workshop on our last Purple Heart. Said he had a coat that was too big for him. Thought maybe it would fit me just
Too
before
small.
I saw it. Too small.
Too small.
Too small. Gorgeous. It's a Carhartt, right? And you want to say hi?
No.
Well then, not in the middle of this. I don't want
Well,
some.
leave it over here so we can use it.
So it has wood is good on the front, and nice big, extremely well done Purple Heart embroidered. And that's the Canadian poppy. November 11th is Remembrance Day, and we remember with a poppy. That was number one. Number two, we're going to start selling these. I'm showing you it again. Ahmed brought and made a mallet for every student in the class, vets and civilians alike. So this one is bloodwood handle, fiddleback maple. It's got a leather face on one side, resin impregnated, yeah, so it's heavy and very durable, wedged. So I didn't even notice this, but the striking face is round like it would be on a mallet, and then leather on this side for adjusting parts so that you don't leave a mark. This one you saw before, which is the bird's eye maple handle with fiddleback maple resin impregnated head. This one is black and white ebony. This was Jake's with the fiddleback maple head. Looks cool in the end. Gorgeous mallets. They'll be ready as soon as we can get them in stock, which I hope won't be much more than a month. Now, something else. So every once in a while, we get a vet that takes this to heart and then turns around and wants to duplicate it. Mark Oliver was one of the first ones that I can think of. Mark was from Idaho, and he recently contacted me. I think I've told you this before, but I'm repeating it because it's important. Mark moved to Ogden, Utah, bought a building or rented a building, and setting up a shop for other vets, and I applaud him. Bob Abbott has done something very similar. It's called Maker's Space, and he's getting that set up down in Virginia. Well, we had a active duty Chinook helicopter pilot here, and he is from Clarksville, Tennessee. And that's his what?
Everything.
That's his everything. His name,
His business.
Bell.
Danny Bell.
Danny Bell. Sorry. Dan has a YouTube channel. I want you to do something for me. I want you to go to his YouTube channel and subscribe. He's really good in front of the camera. He's just getting this started. He's going to open up a store where he'll sell lumber, but he'll also cater to other vets. He'll have Purple Heart information. He's going to sell some of our product. And I just think you should go on there to his channel. If you go on YouTube and search Planer's Edge, you'll find him. Subscribe. I'd like to see his numbers quadruple as a result of tonight. See if you can pull that one off. Now, I want to show you something else. So we have a friend. His name is Sean Mahaffey. Sean's down in Pennsylvania. And Sean has been the one that's been doing our resin impregnating of our mallet heads and our saw handles. So we've been toying around with the idea of coloring some wood. We tried doing some, I'll actually show it to you. At first I thought it'd be really interesting and could make us stand out if we were to ebonize maple. In other words, the resin impregnation is where you plasticize wood to make it stronger and heavier. It makes it really good for a saw handle. However, with the black, for whatever reason, the pigment doesn't go into the wood. So that was the result of the black. It's actually cool in its own right, but it's not black. However, he said the purple worked really well. So I just finished this literally 20 minutes ago. So this is maple with purple infused resin impregnated, and that is the actual color. If you look at the, it's awfully close to the actual Purple Heart color. So I guess we are going to auction this off tonight, and this is going to be, all the proceeds will go to supporting one vet in our next class, which will be in May. Remember, in 2020, we're bumping it up to 36 vets. There'll be 36 civilian spots, 36 combat wounded vet spots. Luther is going to take care of the May, June, and July classes, and Super Dave is going to take care of the August, September, October classes. So it's approximately $3,000 US to cover a vet, all of his expenses. We're giving them more tools too. So we're going to auction this off tonight, and I hope it goes for enough money that we can put a big dent in the cost of bringing a vet here. So that's a dovetail saw, all finished, never been used.
Wood box.
In a wood box.
So,
Oh, way to go, Jake. In a wood box that will not be made out of Purple Heart. But that's tonight's item, so you can start the bidding anytime you want. And for doing a really good deed, you're going to be handsomely rewarded. I have a little block somewhere around here that
he has
you know
one.
what that is, Jake? That little piece of bird's eye that we use when we're
Yeah, it's in here.
Yeah, there it is right there. So I'm going to put this somewhere so we can see it. And by the way, this was the very first challenge coin I ever got. Never even knew what they were. That was came from Mark Oliver. He's a wolfhound.
Somebody's saying they can't find Planer's Edge on YouTube. Oh, never mind.
I just sent the link to the.
They just did?
No, I sent the link to the Facebook page. I'm gonna look for the YouTube link.
Okay.
We have a $200 bid already on the saw.
Well, that's a
Hey.
start.
Why can't anyone find it? I just pulled it up.
That, by the way, is gorgeous. I was actually going to keep that for myself. I thought, you know what? I need a Purple Heart mallet. And then, of course, Frick says, oh, why don't you auction it off? Anyway.
It's my
make one.
it's my favorite one. Can I say that? Is
it?
Yeah, I like
Oh,
it.
Van.
Well, then are you the 200 or are you going to bump it up?
No, we're at 1,000 already.
Are you
What?
serious?
Yeah.
Who?
Way to go,
Jim
boys.
Jim O'Shaughnessy.
Jim.
Jim.
Wow.
You blew that $200 out of
Yeah, there you go, Frick.
How'd it go, Jim?
You're a good man, Jim
Swooped
O'Shaughnessy.
in and saved you.
I'm already out of money.
Jim, he's in Cancun. At least he was. All right, we got to get started now. Do anything else I need to say?
You mentioned the classes. They went well.
Yeah.
This is
Classes were fantastic. We did change the arrangement. Whose idea was? Oh, Bob's idea was. So everything is going to face this way instead of facing this way. Opens it up a little bit. We want some room in here so that we can have chairs for when I'm demonstrating. Puts the bathroom at the back instead of up near the front. And we took out 2 benches because we're only going to do 12 instead of 14 to make it a little bit better. And we're going to start bringing in one vet from a previous class each time we teach to come in as an assistant to help and just reconnect as well. And we're going to a 6-day class. So I'll get this little speech over with and then I'll get started. Starting in 2020, our Purple Heart Project / Training the Hand Workshop is going to run from Monday to Saturday, from 8 in the morning until 11 at night. Somebody came here and thought we were joking. What are you talking about? We actually stayed some nights till 20 after 11. So it will be 6 days long. If you're a civilian, the tuition is $2,000, which is way too cheap. That'll cover all of your meals and your tuition, of course. It will also, Frick, don't eat all that.
Come get a sample of the food.
You will only need to come up with your, additionally, you'll come up with your hotel, which isn't far away, and that's pretty reasonable too. And obviously ship your tools here. If you're a combat wounded vet, we don't get a lot of people applying. We had 33, 34 apply for 15 available spots in this last intake. So by all means, apply, and those of you who are hearing this, please carry this message to the people who need to hear it. In fact, I need somebody to read. If anybody can read that and hold themselves together, fine.
Yeah, I can.
Can you?
The one
So
that you
I got to tell you a little story.
I don't have it on my phone. I read it.
Okay.
but I don't.
So you all know who Super Dave is. Super Dave is Super Dave. Why did we ever explain why he's Super Dave? He's just Super
He
Dave
has.
because he what?
He has.
Oh yeah,
explained.
right. Yeah, you got to hear Super Dave's story on what. I can't get it all out. It involves save. I can't even forget it. Anyway,
Little orphan girls
yeah.
in the Lake of Ontario.
Yeah. And then going back in to save the puppies, and one final dive back in under the water to collect all the single-use plastics to save Lake Ontario. It was a good one. Only Super Dave could come up with it. Anyway, every combat wounded vet that comes as one of our scholarship recipients gets what Luther calls a blue chip. And the blue chip means that we trust your judgment in bringing in another combat wounded vet. And Kevin came as Super Dave's blue chip. Now Kevin, I got to give you a little bit of background. And is Super Dave on?
No.
He's not? Where is he?
Halloween party. I'm tickled to be there.
Can't believe it. Anyway, hopefully if I get wrong, somebody will correct me. Kevin, 7 deployments. Kosovo, 1 in Kosovo, 3 in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan. And he's also served as an EOD. In case you don't know what that is, I got several EODs have come to our workshop. It stands for Explosive Ordnance Disposal. So these guys
Okay.
make it their job.
Just below
That's not
Canada.
Kevin's though.
Just below Canada.
Kevin is over here.
No. I know, but there's an
This is
EOD
Kevin.
badge.
That's Kevin right there. But yeah, I know there's an EOD badge. So their job is to go out and find, using various techniques, find IEDs before the IEDs find our troops. And as a result of those 7 tours, he survived over 150 IED blasts, 37 alone in his last deployment. Well, that kind of trauma makes an incredible impact on your body. And you can imagine the TBIs, the traumatic brain injuries that resulted from it, all kinds of issues, spinal problems. And so he came to the workshop, and it was great. But he wrote a letter yesterday
No.
to.
He wrote a
letter review, and put it on the website yesterday. So if you ever need to have an answer as to why we do this, when you read the letter, you'll better understand. So I'm going to Megan to read it, please.
I got it.
Rick has it.
All right. So he says,
Focus on him.
you go to a woodworking course only thinking you will learn woodworking, but this is not the case with going to a Rob Cosman hand tool workshop. No, you learn much more. I'm a wounded veteran that has suffered from traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord, vision injuries, and bad PTSD. I have 7 deployments, 1 in Kosovo, 3 in Afghanistan, and 3 in Iraq. I've been dealing with a lot of demons and have been depressed for a long while. I had been staying isolated from everyone, and a week before Rob called me to let me know I was accepted for the scholarship, I had a plan to take my life. So I went, and the first day to Rob's shop, he and his family welcomed all of us, and we were family as we all sat down for dinner, which every dinner was handmade by his family, and we all ate together as a family. I learned that I can do woodworking. It may just take me longer, and there is something to live for. With Rob's teaching style, it is easy to follow because he shows you some steps. Then, as you go practice, it was great to be able to meet 7 civilians and 6 other veterans that had the same passion and that I may have not met otherwise. Not only did this course save my life, but it also gave me friends for life. Thank you, Rob, for saving me.
So now we can start the bidding, because this is what you're going to do now. You're going to help me help these guys. And the cause, the need is huge. I've often said we're literally trying to empty this lake with a spoon, but I need help with that spoon, and you're my help. So you want to have that feeling of satisfaction of having done something for these heroes, then you go ahead, participate in any way you can. I'd love to have you here as a student. I'd love to have you help me find another combat wounded vet that needs it. And I'd also appreciate your monetary support, because this is what enables us to keep this program going. But we will do it regardless. If you want to share and have part of it, by all means, be our guest. Ken, anything to add? You were here for a good portion of it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
This is Ken's grandson who came to have his first debut on YouTube. Say hello to Angie.
Hello, Angie.
Hi, Angie.
So we're going to get started. Ange, if I do anything wrong, make sure you let me know. And if you don't know who Angie is, this is Angie. She's right here. She's in charge of t-shirts. And our next crop of t-shirts is coming in the end of the week, end of next week. So our teal t-shirts will be ready, and we'll be restocked with our what color are they?
Teal.
No, the ones we do.
Blue, dark blue.
Blue?
Dark blue? Right.
Navy?
Let's go.
Right, thanks, Ken. So the new ones say "Wood Doing Good," which was Michaela's slogan. I've already hugged her for it. So if you order a t-shirt tonight, we'll give you a shout out to that as well. So tonight's topic is the top 10 hand tools. So I'm going to go through this. I'm really, and depending on your questions, because I want your feedback. I went through today, I changed it a little bit. And I thought, okay, if you're wanting to build furniture primarily with hand tools, what hand tools do you need? I also prioritized it. So if you're going to go out and spend money, here's where you start, here's where you end up. Now, I also did not include anything that would be less than $100. So dividers are critical, they're not in there. Mallet is critical, that's not in there. Anything you can pick up for less than $100, I didn't add. I'll mention it, but I didn't add it. The rest of the stuff is obviously north of $100. So we're going to start right here. And this is with our sharpening. This is the gas that makes the car work, unless you drive a Tesla. In that case, you need electricity. But in order for any of these tools to work properly, you have to have good sharpening gear, and you have to know how to sharpen. And I cannot stress, in fact, I wish I had the students in the last 2 classes standing behind me saying, listen to what he said, it's right. Once you learn how to sharpen, all of this stuff works magically. And it's funny because people, I see it all the time, people buying planes and using them, and going back to the woodcraft store to buy a new blade because the one in their plane was now dull. And I think, oh my goodness, how do these people perform under those circumstances? Ask any one of the 28 people who were here in the last 2 weeks, and they'll tell you, learning how to sharpen was so liberating, they could have left and gone home after they picked that skill up alone, because everything else all of a sudden just got so easy. If you're sitting there wondering whether or not you've ever learned how to sharpen based on not being able to evaluate what you have because you've never seen anything any better, get Jake to send you one of our blades that we do up for you so that you can get it, put it in your plane, and now you know what a real sharp blade performs like.
Buy one of the blades.
Well, yeah, you got to buy one, but we can't just give them away. Got a business to run. All right, so here's the stones. Here's my recommendation. I'll start with the least and go to the best. The absolute bare minimum, which is going to get you through on planes, is going to be this diamond stone by Trend. And I have to mention, these guys have given us, donated a stone for every vet in every class we've taught, and we just finished our 13th class. So a big shout out to Trend. Jamie in North Carolina has been extremely supportive. The nice thing about the Trend diamond plate, it's double-sided.
You don't
Huh?
know. Is it with me?
No, it's out in the other shop. But this is just a different model. It has a 1,000 grit side and a 300 grit side. You use the 300 grit side to keep your other stone flat. What do I mean? Well, my finishing stone that I recommend is a 16,000 grit. And I don't know how much detail you want, but I'm going to give you a lot. Most people go to 6,000, maybe even 8,000. 16,000 costs maybe $30, $40 more at the most. Consider this is going to last you 6 to 8 years. If you take that extra cost and divide out over the amount of time you're going to have it, it's not even worth doing the math. And the difference in the 16,000 edge versus an 8,000 edge is literally night and day. So the 16,000, there's no compromise there. That's what you have to have. And it has to sit on that holder, which is what this thing is. It's a nice big heavy holder that holds it flat and won't let it slide around on your bench. You just have to suck it up and buy it because that's what will work. You can get away with just those two. Start here, finish here. When you do, before every time I go over and use 16,000, I take the 300 grit side of this stone and I come over here and I rub it on the 16 to get it nice and flat. I should actually be demonstrating this.
You can't.
Why?
Because you don't have a trend thing.
No, I can use this. Just like that. Only takes a few seconds to do, and the stone is back to being flat. There, I left a spot in the middle that didn't. Now, I'll actually walk through. I can't imagine anybody out there not having already seen me do this, but just in case. What blade am I going to use? I'll take the one out of here.
Here.
What?
There's blades in there. That's it.
Monster. All right, here's how I would do it. Starting on the, this is actually a 600, but let's pretend that it's a 1,000 because that's what I normally would use, but it's in the other room. Set that down on the primary blade, on the primary bevel.
Okay, you can't use that.
I
It's
can.
a high angle blade.
It doesn't matter. I still sharpen.
You're not going to do the back bevel.
Yeah, true. Set that down on the primary bevel. That's your main bevel. The only part of this blade that ever touches the wood is right out here. So we don't need to touch any of this, just right up at the very tip. So I hold the blade like that, set it down on the primary bevel, find it, raise up 3 or 4 degrees, do little tight circles. And on this one you can stay in one spot. You don't have to worry about where like you do on the 16,000. Now I have my wrist locked, my elbows locked, everything is coming from my shoulders. That way I can maintain that angle easier or more accurately. Feel for a burr. As soon as I get a burr, I come over here to the 16,000. Some people sometimes ask, do you wipe the, to avoid cross-contamination, do you wipe the blade before you move over to the other stone? I don't normally. I've never had an issue, but I just did, so you can, I can say I at least showed you that. Over here on the 16,000, I do the same thing. Find the primary, raise up a little bit higher than I did on this one. This stone I created what's called the secondary bevel. Now what I'm going to do is create a third bevel so that I'm only working the very leading edge. As long as I raise up a few degrees higher than I was over there, only the leading edge touches. And on this stone, what I'm going to do different, because it wears with use, I'm going to slowly migrate out over the surface. Takes about 10 seconds total. At the end of 10 seconds, I'm going to stay in the same motion I am. I'm just going to push a little bit harder with my right index finger to drive that corner down into the stone. Then I'm going to do the same thing with my pinky on my left hand. And what that does is it creates a little feathering effect on the outside corners. What that does is prevent you from having plane tracks when you plane a wide panel. The final step, I'm going to take a thin steel rule. Jake has those as well. I'm going to put that on the side of the stone, and I always keep it in the same spot so it's flush with the outside edge of this stone. And then I'm going to set my blade down, and I'm going to stay within 1/4 of an inch of this side, so I'm not going to go inside of that mark I just made. 3 fingers to distribute the pressure, and just wiggle that forward and back for about 3 seconds just to remove any burr on the back of the blade. And that's all there is to it. So your total sharpening time is somewhere around 32 seconds. Once you learn that, oh my goodness. I hope some guys chirp up and say, yes, that's right. Once you learn that, it's just, you walk into a whole new world of woodworking. So this is your basic system. Now, for the sake of saying it, I'm going to say, I'll tell you what the premium system is. And there are people that are fanatics, myself included, that want to have the back of their blades done perfectly. And that means shiny from tip to tip. And in order to do that, you're not going to be able to do it with the system I just showed you. Now, what do I mean? This stone is flat, but it is not that flat. It'll work on planes, it'll work on chisel edges, but the initial preparation of your chisel back, you will not get it like that no matter how hard you try. For that, you have to step up, and it's a big step. You have to step up to the all Shapton system. And that's what, using the 1000 grit Shapton, and this is the Shapton lapping plate. Now that's the only purpose for this is to flatten your stones prior to use. It has a grit somewhere around 300, but the hardest part to swallow is the cost of that. It's approximately $400, $380 to be exact. Jake, I can't get that thing off. Yeah. So I'll just show you quickly how it's used. You lubricate it. This is glass with diamond embedded. Use it the same way you'd use the other one. Only difference is it's going to make it that much flatter.
While you're doing that, you want to talk about the height of the station? Everyone's kind of chatting about it.
Yep. And then you come over here and do the 500 or the 1000, whatever it is. Now, you wouldn't think it's a huge difference, but when you go through and do a chisel, it's extremely different. Now, that's the ultimate system, and if you want that, like I said, if you're willing to pay for it, you'll love it, but it's hard to swallow that first little bit. What did I do with that rag? So the height. We have a sharpening station that we put on this end of the bench. The reason is you never use this end of the bench for anything else, so it's never in the way. I'm here when I'm cutting joints. I'm down here when I'm planing. I'm never at that end of the bench. I watch people, when I first started teaching this, I watched them trying to sharpen. So here they are. They've got their stone at bench height. Why would you not do it at bench height? And in the process of doing this, first thing you notice is they're pivoting from their wrist. Second thing you notice is that in the process of doing this, little circles or figure eights, they're having to do this at the same time to even the wear. In the process of trying to do this and do this at the same time, they made an absolute mess of their blade. And most people, if you were to ask, what was your last experience like trying to freehand sharpen, you would define that as digging a hole in a board, because it just didn't work for them. What I noticed that what I discovered, whatever, if you drop your sharpening station down so that there's my knee, so I'm that.
Give them a measurement.
No, it's no good to give them a measurement.
Yes.
No, it's not. I'm going to give it related to their body. So there's my knee, there's the height, okay? Because depending on how tall you are, this may or may not work, this height. What happens is, now when you're sitting over top of the stone, you can move your pivoting point from your wrist all the way up to your shoulder. And the farther away you can get that pivot point, the easier it's going to be to maintain that angle. The other advantage is, especially when you're working on the stones that wear, so if you use a water stone or a ceramic, it wears with use. It's the way it's made. As you rub the tool over the stone, the bonding agent that holds all those little abrasive particles together is designed to wear away, so you're constantly exposing a fresh layer of cutting particles. Well, In order to do in order to avoid that occurring just in one spot, while you're doing this, you just rock slowly, heel and toe, out over the stone and back, and you even out your wear without having to add a second motion to your arm like you would if you were doing it up here at bench height. That's my simple reason for this. And does it work? Well, yeah, there's 28 people in the last 2 weeks that learned how well it works. All right, any questions on sharpening gear? I'm going to move on. No?
No, everyone's talking about your jacket.
And your legs.
How about my new shoes? My indestructible shoes. I did a little blurb on them on
Mine are better.
How about Megan's?
well,
Jay, you just shot Megan's.
how about those?
Are they steel?
These
Oh yeah.
are not appropriate for the shop. These are steel toe, the most comfortable shoes I've ever had, and they pay us if you buy them and you use our code. They pay us 10%, and that goes towards our Purple Heart project as well.
Where do you get them?
How do you get them? Frick will do the link stuff.
The shoes are
Anyway.
available on the website?
I put these on. I've had these 3 months.
August.
Yeah.
Longer than that.
And I can't believe how comfortable they are. I haven't taken them off since. And I have a scar to prove their value. See that right there? Jake and I were unloading a shaper of the back of the trailer on a skid, and it slipped off the end before I realized it and came down on my toe. And I still have a toe. I have a scar on the side of my shoe, but I have my toe. All right. We can move on?
Yep.
And the jacket is gorgeous. Thank you, Ahmed, again. Second tool. Now, again, I'm doing this in terms of, okay, the use that we're going to get out of the tools. And buy your stones, and then we got to have something to use them with. So this is going to be the plane. This is a 5.5. This is what I would consider to be your first purchase. The exception would be that if you're a female or if you're a small person, not under 150 pounds, if you want to use that as a break point, you might want to consider a number 5. Approximately the same length, but narrower. Instead of a 2 3/8 inch wide blade, it's a 2-inch blade. But I say that, I still would push most people towards a 5.5. Why? Because it's heavy enough and long enough to use on a shooting board and be very good on a shooting board, yet it's not too big and it's not too heavy for general purpose on the bench. It's just an all-around fantastic plane. Also, it's a wider sole. You're pushing a blade that's 2 3/8 inch wide versus 2 inch, which is a little more efficient when you're planing a wide panel, but it's also a wider footprint, so it's more stable in use. It's a great plane, fantastic plane. And I gotta give David Charlesworth credit, because I used to promote the 4.5 as being your first plane. I did that for years. And then hanging around David and him talking about his 5.5, how much he liked it, and I tried it, and to be quite honest, it didn't take very long to convince me, yeah, this is probably a better purpose, and a better first choice. And prior to that, I would have considered a jack plane to be not even on the list. But I think this is we call it a super smoother. Great plane. If you want to talk brands for a second, that's a Wood River. Lee Nielsen makes the best. I'll go on record for saying that. Lee Nielsen makes the best. However, the difference between a Wood River and a Lee Nielsen is mostly superfluous improvement. Now, I don't mean that to be negative. I'm just telling you, you're going to pay more money, but it's not going to perform any different. Now, let me just give you a quick example. We'll put this piece of my favorite wood, yellow cedar. I'll try maple too if you want. And I'm going to take that blade that I just sharpened, and we're going to put it in here. And then I'm going to ask you. You're not going to be able to answer it because you can't feel it. But I'll have Ken come over. Everybody trusts Ken. He's just one of those trustworthy people. And I'm going to have him feel the wood. And I'm going to say, Ken, if I just spent another $150 on a Lee Nielsen, would this feel any different? And hopefully his answer will be what I'm expecting. Now, you know what I got to do? When I run my fingernail across there, instead of that being nice and smooth, there's some nicks in there. So I didn't spend enough time fixing that.
You shouldn't have to go back to the 500.
Yeah, I do. Now get a good burr. You're really confusing them, Jake, because you just called this a 500. It's supposed to be a 1000. I gotta get a stronger burr. This is the one time you might want to spend more time on this original stone would be the time that you have fairly heavy nicks in the blade. They're not terrible, but they're significant enough that I'm having to work to get a heavier burr. Okay, that's better. Now we'll jump over here to the 16,000. Up a little bit higher. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Downward pressure for 3 seconds in one corner, then the opposite. Put the steel rule on there, lay that on its back. 1, 2, 3 seconds, removing the burr.
Is that the Wood River or the IBC blade?
This is the Wood River blade. This is the standard blade that comes with the plane. I got a lot of tools to get through, so keep me on track. Holy smokes. We may have to pick this up a little.
We're 40 minutes in.
Well, you know what? That's all right, because this will, this little demo will suffice for several other tools. Besides, we're not in a hurry, are we, Megan?
Yeah.
You'll get, how do you get harassed online? You know, last time you said you wanted to quit and they didn't want to quit.
Cyberbullying?
So, yeah, you'll be cyberbullied. Little wax to reduce the friction. Now, lateral adjustment lever right here to get that blade parallel to the sole. I'm still pulling up a shaving that's heavy on the right side, so I push a little more. Advance the blade a little more. A little more still. I hate the look of that. Oh, this is a disaster. Look at that. Son of a gun.
Do I need to fix it for you?
No, I'm gonna come over here. I got bad enough nicks in this that I have to go right to the grinder. Now I'm using new CBN wheel. This actually probably should be added, although we're talking hand tool, I would consider a bench grinder essential tool number 11. And if you're going to get a bench grinder, you need to get one of these wheels because it makes such a huge improvement in the way this works. Automatically balanced when you put it on, never needs to be dressed. Because it's a big, thick hunk of steel, it acts as a great heat sink. So I've been grinding that as long as I have, and that's not even warm. Cuts amazingly fast. I think it's probably the biggest improvement in grinding technology that I've seen. And the tool rest was a close second, made by One Way Manufacturing. And it by itself will turn an inexpensive grinder into a very effective tool. Mounts on the base, not on the tool itself, so it'll fit any grinder. All right, so I just started all the way over, brand new bevel. Got to get this right. I can't fake it. Sometimes it doesn't always go like you want on camera.
Especially when we're live.
Assume we're live. what are you gonna do? All right, primary bevel. Now, coming right from the grinder, you've got to now straighten the edge because there's no way that you're going to get a perfectly straight edge off of the grinder. But laying it on a flat stone will produce a straight edge. And I'll be able to tell just by looking at it. Okay, I don't know if you can see, but I've got a bevel that starts here, but it ends about 1/16 of an inch shy on that side. So I want it to be all the way across, so I'll work it a little bit more.
Okay, while you're doing that, we have some donations from David Ducharme, Daniel Gang,
Thank you, David. Thank you, Daniel.
Andrew bought a t-shirt.
Thank you, Andrew. I should mention, I think David has donated every time. David was a student in our class up in Niagara Falls. He gets it. He's also a vet. And he has donated, I think, every time we've had a live broadcast.
Yeah, and these are each $100 donations, so
Thank you, gentlemen.
very generous. And we have another $100 donations from Bob Cunningham and Gary Burnett.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Gary.
Here.
Gary. And then we have a $500 donation from Derek Vaselka. Vaselka? Could
What?
have said that wrong.
Tell me that last one.
Derek Vaselka
From where?
from Bishop, California.
Thank you, Derek.
$500. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very
you.
generous. Thank you. Thank you.
And Dave Curley wants the First Teal T-shirt. He'll come up and get it personally.
Triple the price.
Double XL.
Tell 'em you're going
Quad-
for it.
Yeah, one for each arm. All right, if you look at this closely, you'll see my new bevel runs all the way, okay? So at that point I'm done, and I now know that that is straight from there to there. So now I can jump over to my 16 and just create that little tertiary bevel, which is really just refining the secondary bevel that we just created. Ken, I'm still going to get you the feel the wood. As soon as I get it working. Where's our purple dovetail saw?
It's still at Jim's
yeah,
donation.
still Jim's. $1,000.
Now, what's the fun in a two-person auction?
Yeah, Jim took the excitement out of it.
Jim, you were
Yeah,
too
Jim.
generous.
Spoiler. Jimmy, you got to be more like a sniper. An eBay sniper.
Richie is asking if you could quickly explain why 3 bevels.
Who asked me that?
Richie?
Richie? Yeah, I can. The big bevel, the main bevel, is called your primary. That's your 25 degree. Why 25 degrees? Well, your plane, the frog, part of your plane, supports the blade or presents the blade to the wood at 45 degrees. So the bevel obviously has to be below 45. As you make the bevel lower and lower, more acute, you have less and less metal out there at the tip. So if you get down too low, and I'll give you an example, Jake makes these 17-degree chisels for dealing with softwood. But there's very little wood out there. There's very little metal out there. Won't work in a hardwood, but works extremely well in a softwood. So fragile. So you don't want to take your plane blade down too much below 25 degrees because you're going to run into those issues. So your primary bevel is parked at 25. Now, we don't want to polish all of that. It's a wasted time. If the only part of this blade that does any work is right up here, then working the area down here would be a complete waste of time, as would it be there, there, there. You can all go all the way up to just staying away from the edge. So we go on the 1000 grit stone and we create what's called a secondary bevel, which just allows us to get up off of the primary and create a bevel right out there at the edge. It's also how we straighten it. So I should have explained this a little bit better. When I was over here creating a new primary bevel because I had a bad edge, there's no way operating freehand that I'm going to get that edge to be perfectly straight off of the bench grinder. Close, but not perfect. This stone is flat. So when I come over here, as long as I'm up off of the primary, I can eventually create a secondary bevel that will be perfectly straight from corner to corner. Now it's a little wider there than it is there, but that doesn't matter. And because it's wider, because I wasn't perfectly straight coming off the bench grinder, but that doesn't matter. Once you've straightened that, you're able to come over here to the 16,000. And let's say that secondary bevel measures 1/120th of an inch. The only part of it I need to use or polish is the very leading edge. So when I come over to this stone, I can raise up a little bit higher still, create a third bevel, and only work the very leading edge. So it's all about reducing time. Total running time usually is around 32 seconds. Otherwise, if you were there and you had to polish, if you were to start off by polishing your primary bevel on that stone and then the primary bevel on this stone, you'd be there for 20 minutes. Hope that answers your question. When you put this blade in, make sure there's no debris between the back of the blade and the face of the frog. Make sure that everything sits down there properly, makes good contact with the frog. Now I'm looking down the blade, or looking down the sole at the blade, I should say, and I can see the blade. It just shows up as a thin black line as I gaze at it up against a light colored background. I'm going to pull the blade in by spinning the adjuster knob as you look at it in a counterclockwise rotation. And as the blade just starts to dip below the surface, I can make any fine adjustments to get it perfectly parallel. Now I'm going to pull it all the way in, so it's no longer sticking below the surface. Little wax to reduce the friction. As I start to plane, I'm going to start spinning the adjuster knob, this time in a clockwise rotation, to advance that blade until I start to pick up a shaving. And I'm picking up shavings that's heavy on the right side. So I'm going to take my lateral adjustment lever and push it just a little bit toward the right side. The pivot point is in here. So as I push it this way, it's going to take that high right side and pull it in and put the left side down. So that's why you always push your lever toward the side which happens to be high. This is better. Still high. Now it's working. Paid off. Ken, isn't that gorgeous? I'm going to pull the blade in a little more. It's still a little bit high on the left side. You can tell because the shaving was heading toward the right. Still heading toward the right. Move it over just a little bit more. We're making such fine adjustments when we do this. Okay, Ken, run your hand on that. So here's the question. 275?
270.
270. A Lee Nielsen is 375, I believe. If I went out and spent $100 more and got a Lee Nielsen plane, do you think you'd be able to feel any difference in the wood?
I can't imagine it now.
No, because we've already got it to a point where we could not, with our fingers or our eye, detect any improvement. So at that point, you have to say, do I want to go for value or pretty? Up to you. My advice is go for the value. All right, any questions on 5.5? Any questions on your first plane? If you're Canadian, you can buy it from us. We're happy to serve you. RobCosman.com. If you're in the U.S., we have an agreement with Woodcraft that we do not sell the planes back into the United States, and I honor that. Come to our workshop, that's a different story, but we don't sell them in there, but you can get them from Woodcraft. You can go to woodcraft.com, or you can go to any of the Woodcraft stores, which I would recommend you go because that's where you're going to get some hands-on instruction and advice. So I'm going to leave number 2. We're going to go on to number 3, chisels. You can get by with just a quarter, a half, and a 3/4. I used to sell Lee Nielsens, and I would sell people a set of 9, and I can guarantee you that if you went to look at their shop 5 years later, there'd be 4 chisels, maybe even 5 that had never come out of the tool roll. Because if you have a quarter, do you really need 5/16? Probably not. Now these are what are these? IBC. I had a hand in developing them. IBC in Toronto makes them for us. What's really good about them is that you can take the handle off completely. Take the handle off, and you can have a guy like Ahmed send you a beautiful black and white ebony handle. Take the ferrule off. Now when you're doing your initial preparation, and this is where this idea came from. Lee Nielsen make beautiful chisels. My second favorite. However, here's the problem. There's a Lee Nielsen. Now you'll notice that the back, and I'm not being negative, I'm just pointing something out. The back is nice and flat. And there's a little spot right here where the back ends, the flat back ends. There's a little bit of a dip right there. But if you keep moving the chisel this way, you run into this cone. And what happens, remember, these are novices that are just getting into the sport. You're sitting in here and you're honing, doing your initial flattening and honing phase. You're moving this chisel forward and back. I'll actually do it, show you what I mean. And you're running from side to side. Now, when you're doing a chisel, you're always in the middle, over to the left, back to the middle. You're never going over here because you're just on the reference surface. And the reason you're moving it side to side while you're moving it forward and back is you've got a little blending area in there. If you stayed in one spot, you'd end up cutting a ridge somewhere in the middle of your chisel. But by moving it side to side, this outside area just kind of blends. But if you happen to go over too far, look what happens. It gets the cone, it elevates the chisel, and all of a sudden you lose your flat back right there at the tip where you need it the most. Not a good scenario. So, when I developed these IBC chisels, I wanted a chisel that would lay perfectly flat on your stone when you're working. So there's nothing to interfere and take you away from having that perfect flat back. Now, you don't have to do the entire back, even if you're just doing it like this. Again, you have no obstruction over there at all. Another nice feature, you can make the handles out of whatever you want, which brings me to another point. We're going to start selling these really fancy handles very soon, right, Ahmed? And if you want a really, really light chisel, you can make a handle out of pine. Why? Because the chisel, you actually don't hit, see if I can get this to come out. You don't hit, no, can't, that one's too tight. You don't hit the wood. Let me take this one apart and I'll show you. Is this one tight too?
Yes.
Yes, what?
About the handles.
That one's too tight. Let's try this one. This one's going to come apart. There, okay? So you make your own handle if you want. Bore a hole down, I can't remember the size. This is the connector with an aluminum cap at the top. So when you're hitting the chisel, you're not hitting the wood. It's sandwiched between the two, but that does not apply a lot of pressure to the wood. You can make a handle out of pine if you wanted to have a really light chisel, or if you just wanted to be pretty, you can make it out of whatever you want with no concern about the handle being broken. That means you can use burl, stuff that would otherwise not be usable on a chisel handle. They're cryogenically treated A2 steel, triple tempered. They have reliefs on the side, but they've got a little flat spot right there so that you don't, some chisels have the bevel that goes right to the back and it leaves a knife edge there. You hold the chisel in your hand and you're slicing your fingers open. This has a little flat right there. Why the beveled edge? Well, when you're cutting dovetails and you've got to get in between,
Here.
had a sample.
Oh, you haven't cut it open yet.
Yeah. You've got to get, here, I'll use these. This was one of the students last week. When you're cutting your dovetails, you've got to be able to get in to the corner, move, without bruising the side of the tail. That's why you have a bevel on the edge. And that little landing, that won't interfere. So there's your chisels. And I must add this. If you spend your money right on the chisels, it may be painful initially, but it'll pay you every time you pick them up. If you scrimp on your chisels, every time you use them, you'll curse them and you'll wish, why didn't I spend the money the first time? How many people have had to live through that? Mortise chisels. If you're going to do strictly hand tool work, you need to have a mortise chisel. And a proper mortise chisel, these are Nielsen's, currently the best mortise chisels you're going to find. These are handles made by Ahmed again. This one looks like, kind of looks like
Asian
Macassar
stripe.
ebony, but I don't think it's, which one is it?
Asian striped ebony.
Asian striped ebony, and what's this one? Looks like a piece of cocobolo.
Yeah.
Your mortise chisel should be the same width top to bottom. So when you're chopping, the sides help keep it from twisting. If you chop a mortise with a beveled edge, you have no reference on the side and the chisel will twist on you. This reduces that substantially. Big beefy chisel, by the way. That's a 1/2 inch, that's a 1/4. I would suggest you have those two. If you can get a third one, add a 3/8 in there. Okay, chisels.
Do the IBCs come with a handle?
Yes, yeah.
Maple or walnut?
The IBCs come with both a maple or a walnut, your choice. Here's the standard maple handle, and Megan's got a walnut one over here. No difference in price. Cute. Okay, that's the walnut. And they are $70 a piece, but good for a lifetime. Any more questions on chisels? Just should be, because these are probably the most important tools. This is the one tool that every type of woodworking you're going to need, whether you're framing houses or whether you're building furniture. Everybody needs chisels. What were you going to say, Frick?
Just going, quick question back to that CBN wheel. What's the grit on that one?
Well, so Jake and I, or Jake mostly, Jake's been doing this. Jake's been working with a company to make us an 80 grit wheel. You got to remember, when you're using the grinder, you're creating your primary bevel. The surface quality of the primary bevel doesn't matter. It's simply there to get metal out of the way so that you can go in and more readily create your cutting edge on your stones. So surface quality of the primary bevel does not matter. The coarser the grit, the faster and the cooler it will cut. So that's why we went with an 80 grit instead of 120. So, and the speed is ridiculous. I don't even want to tell you how fast it is because it's a long story, but it's that wheel alone changes the entire scene when it comes to grinding. And if you've been the type that have avoided it because of fear of burning steel, it's not impossible, but it would be pretty difficult to burn the steel with that wheel. You agree, Ken? Totally. Because a regular grinding wheel is very porous, and the only heat escapes either through the sparks or into the tool that's being ground. Because that thing, I'll show you. There's what the wheel looks like. So it's a big solid hunk of steel. I shouldn't say solid, but it's a pretty substantial piece of steel. That's probably 3/8 of an inch thick, and it weighs 7, 8 pounds, might even be 10 pounds. And that ends up being a great heat sink. So a lot of the heat goes into here. Really amazing, the improvement that we've seen with that. All right, can we move on to saws?
Yep.
All right, so now we're thinking about building a piece of furniture. We've got what we need to sharpen our tools. We've got what we need to start the smoothing process. We're going to have chisels. They're going to be an integral part of everything that we do. Now we got to move into saws. And these can kind of be switched one way or the other. In fact, they probably should, if you're going to look at it seriously. We need to do the breaking down into smaller parts before we do the joinery. So I'm going to switch it like this. You're going to want to cross-cut and a rip. My recommendation are Nielsen's. They make a really good saw. I love the way they feel. I love the attention to detail they put into the handles. They fit comfortably. Just a really good saw. Now, I'm not framing, so I have a very fine crosscut. It's 12 teeth per inch. Most hand saws were used in carpentry, and that would be way too fine. Those guys would be down around 6 or 7 teeth per inch. But we're doing joinery related stuff with this. So my crosscut is 12 teeth per inch. My rip is 7 teeth per inch, which is plenty fast enough. I can cut most boards. If you're under 2 feet in length, I could rip the board probably faster than it would take you to go over there to the table saw, set it up, rip the board, and come back over here. It might be close. Okay, questions on these? If you want to know the length, there's hand saws a lot longer. I find these quite comfortable to use. The usable part is 20 inches on both of them. Can't tell you the cost, don't remember anymore. Mine take a beating, I
think
loan
they're
them out to
225.
everybody.
I
Pardon?
think they're 225.
225, and that's a good
think.
price. I wouldn't complain about that at all. In fact, I'm probably gonna buy another couple of each just to have for the when we teach the classes. Shall I move on?
Maybe 320.
Yes, no?
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're gonna get into the joinery saws. This is where it's gonna start to make a difference. You're not going to use either of these saws to produce a finished cut. You're gonna get close. You're gonna come in with your plane and your shooting board, and you're going to bring pieces down to the finished dimension. When you step over here, you can start to actually do things where the saw is the final thing you do. So I'm gonna put this as number one, my dovetail saw. And if you're like me and you're into cutting dovetails, you wanna get to a point, and I'm gonna show you by example, you're gonna get to a point where you can make a cut, and that's all you have to do. Meaning it will leave a joinable surface. So I'm taking a piece of cherry, and that piece of cherry, I think this was, can't remember whose board this was. By the way, did anybody see if Pete was on tonight? Pete Ambrose from Mississippi. Yeah, message him, see if he's on, please. I'm gonna come in about 3/4 of an inch, and I'm gonna make a cut. And I'm gonna cut as deep as I can go with this dovetail saw. Now I'm gonna ask you a question. What characteristics do you need in the two surfaces to get a good glue joint? Since the delay is such that it's going to take me too long for you to respond, let me tell you. You need two flat surfaces. The more contact, the better. The flatter and the smoother they are, the better will be the joint. Your saw has to produce such. So what you do to test your saw is you do what I just did, and then you put the two pieces back together, and you look and see what kind of a joint you end up with. And you spin it around to check. I'm going to get rid of that little fuzz. And you should end up with a nice, flat, gluable surface. So now when the side of your tail comes up against the side of your pin, you have maximum contact, and you get a good glue joint that there's no way you have to come in and do anything with a chisel to make it any better. Okay? So what that means is that one step is the only step. If you're cutting dovetails with a saw that requires you to come back and somehow with a chisel correct that what the saw didn't do, oh my goodness, I wouldn't even go there. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cuts on a 3-tailed joint, and then do your pins, put it together, and it fits. And we have all kinds of examples. In fact, let's take a, no, we can't. Shoot, it's too far away, and you're tethered by a cord. Well, I wanted to take you out and show you our wall where we're putting all of our old planes on one of the walls. So the guys in the class had the option, if they wanted to make this little base that we use, which is there's
You can
two
show it.
dovetailed corners.
You
Huh?
can show it.
Yeah, but you can't get close enough to actually
You can
see
zoom.
No, I can't get close enough to see the
it.
dovetail.
Well, here, just take
Oh,
a
the
quick
dovetails.
peek. So over here in the wall, I got all kinds of antique planes.
Whoa, what a mess.
So those little boxes, 3-sided box,
Zoom
and
in,
then the
Jake.
guys wrote a little message on the back end. But you can look at some of the samples of the dovetails, and most of these represent guys that have been cutting dovetails for the first time in the class that week. And nobody's allowed to test fit, and nobody's allowed to come back and fiddle about with chisel, so that's how it was coming right off of the saw. That is dovetail success. Crosscut saw, same holds. If you're cutting a mortise and tenon joint, and when it comes time to cutting that shoulder, you want a saw that will allow you to come in and make a cut such see if I've got something flat. You want to be able to come in and make a joint that looks like that right from your saw. And that's the kind of surface that you're going to get from my crosscut saw. And I will go on record as saying that it is the best joinery crosscut saw that you are going to find. 2 thou set per side, cuts like a dream. And this isn't about self-promotion. This is about getting you started on the right foot. You buy crappy saws, you will never be good at dovetails because it will destroy your desire to do it. You battle with that thing enough times. Now, third saw would be a tenon saw. There are times when you're cutting a tenon, typically they're going to be in wider stock, not necessarily thicker, but wider, and you're going to have a longer cut. What limits your saw in its efficiency is the size of the tooth, because as this is pushing through the wood, there's very little set on either side, so any of the sawdust that's being cut by the tooth is going into the gullet directly ahead of the tooth. And once that gullet fills up with sawdust, it can't cut anymore because there's no place for the sawdust to go. So if you're going to make a longer or wider cut in thicker wood, then you need a bigger tooth. Now it's not that much bigger, but it's enough. This is a 12 TPI versus a 15. And the steel plate is thicker. This is 20 thousandths of an inch. This is 25 thou. Same amount of set, so that you get that nice, great tracking, meaning they start sawing on an angle, and that saw will continue to go on that angle. That will not move one way or the other. So that's your medium tenon. I actually purposely made that saw after teaching classes because this is my full-size tenon. You see how much bigger it is. And if you're not doing this a lot, this becomes a little bit difficult to control. It's a heavy saw, and there's a lot of distance from the tooth line up to this heavy brass back. So I cut that saw down, made it 1 inch shorter. I cut the depth of cut down, and it's a lot easier to control. So if you're a very part-time woodworker, that might be your best choice. Any questions on saws?
Have you talked about large handles if they want to know if there's a reference they can use?
Yeah, certainly. I'll talk about that. I also want to mention this too, that 10% of all of our saw sales go to the Purple Heart Project. So think about that when you're purchasing your saw. There's a custom saw handle. Actually, let me show you the two. This is for Joseph. It's the last. How many more do I owe him, or did I already get them all done? One more. Joseph, sorry. I'll get at it. So here's a regular hand.
Eventually.
What?
Eventually.
Oh, I will, I promise. Megan, keep bugging me about it. So there's a regular handle, and there's the large one I'm doing for Joseph's big paw. That's how much bigger it is. So what I do is I measure my hand, or your hand, at the base of the fingers with the outstretched palm, and mine measures, I think, 3.5 inches. 3.5 inches from here to here. If you're any more than 4, you need to go to the bigger handle. So when I hold that, I'm quite comfortable, and I've got a little bit of wiggle room. Actually, I'm going to say 3 3/4. But when I hold that, there's way too much room. That's too big for me. So that's the second size that we offer. Any other questions on saws?
Nope.
Now, I didn't mention the Fretsaw because it's an inexpensive saw, but that would be my fourth saw that you would want to have if you're cutting joints.
Do you have to use a low-speed grinder for the CBN?
No, you do not. And actually, that's the other nice thing about it. If you put a regular wheel, a regular grinding wheel on, it's got paper washers, one on either side. That's to prevent the steel washer from applying too much pressure and possibly cracking it. They're not balanced very well. You've got to go in and do that. It is a pain to get that thing to spin even close to being true. These are automatic. You put them on, they're already balanced.
Yeah, well, Luther just said yes, you do.
What? Yes, you do what?
There's a question.
That you do have to use a low-speed grinder.
Luther, you do not need a low-speed grinder on this CBN wheel. Mine, you can use a 3450 or 1725. It doesn't matter. It would be this would be safer used on a high speed than the regular wheel because it is balanced before you even add it on there. He and I are not talking about the same thing, I don't think. All right, I don't know what number we're on, but the next one is going to be a low-angle block plane. How are we for time? We're okay.
Now we're 10.
If you're going to buy a block plane, you want to buy the low angle. I'll explain why.
Do we want a high angle to show the difference?
Megan, can you get me a standard angle block plane? You know where it's out. It's out on the.
I already got
No,
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 that
but
one's
there's
in
one
a
already
bag.
opened. It's on display out on the wall.
It's the one that sticks up taller.
What? You sell these tools?
Ken's got it.
I sell them in the boxes.
All right, I'm going to put that on hold until Ken gets back. Let's jump over to this. This is going to be your medium shoulder plane. Now, block planes, blade does not go all the way to either side. Bench planes, blade does not go all the way to either side. Only rabbiting planes, shoulder planes, have blades that go all the way to both sides. So here's a rabbiting plane, blade goes all the way. Here's a shoulder plane, blade goes all the way. Even a skew block plane only goes one side. So if I'm cutting the tenon, which is the male portion of a mortise and tenon joint, and I've got to go in there and I've got to address the shoulder. I don't have a RobCosman crosscut saw. I didn't get a perfect cut. Now I got to go in and fix it. Thank you again. So you have to come in and you have to dress that shoulder to make it nice and square. So when that shoulder comes in and fits into that tenon, all around the perimeter is nice and tight. In order to do that, you have to be able to cut right into a vertical surface. So your shoulder plane allows that. The blade is a little bit wider than the sole, so you can do what I just did. If I was going to be working up to this side, I want that blade to be flush. If I'm going to be working up to this side, I'll push this down on a solid surface, moves the blade over, now it's working flush to that side. So you get lots of reference surface on the side, so that it would lay up against it like that, and making sure that this joint is nice and square. Now, this is a 3/4. This is what I would recommend. If you're cutting, the majority of the time you're going to be using 3/4 stock. And the rule of thumb, if you want to call it that, or the rule that we follow, I wish I had a couple pieces of wood. I should have grabbed them. Ken, we got 3 pieces of dovetail wood that we had last week. 3 the same size. If you're using 3/4 stock and you're cutting a mortise and tenon joint, you don't want to have a 1/2 inch thick tenon going into a mortise that has 1/8 inch thick walls. If you've got a 3/4 inch board that you've cut a square hole to accept a mortise that's 1/2 inch wide, well, that's only going to leave you 1/8 of an inch on either side. That's going to be the weak link. So what you do is you make your tenon on a 3/4 inch thick board, 1/4 of an inch wide. You got a 1/4 inch shoulder, 1/4 inch tenon, 1/4 inch shoulder, and then when you cut your mortise, the hole, you have a 1/4 inch cheek, 1/4 inch hole, 1/4 inch cheek. So that means that most of the time you're only going to need 1/4 of an inch capacity on your shoulder plane. Even if you jump up to using 1.5 inch stock, then you would have 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch on your tenon. You'd only need a 1/2 inch capacity. Again, 3/4 covers it. You can get a big shoulder plane like this, but you're not going to need that capacity, rarely if ever. And you go to a smaller one, you're going to outstrip your capacity in the example I just showed you. Here's what I mean. Thanks, Ken. So if this is your, no, let me just chop this off real fast. Actually, there's a piece right there. So here's my here's what my tenon would look like. Right? So you'd want this to be the same thickness as this and as this. And when you cut your mortise, you'd want to have the hole, this, and this all to be the same size. And just show you real quick. So when you're going in and having to address this shoulder, you're going to set your plane like so, referencing the side up against the cheek of the tenon, and then you can plane across there and square that to this and get it nice and straight so it fits properly against the mating piece. So that's the reason for the 3/4 inch shoulder plane. I like this plane. I'll give you a little bit of more prep on this. This is the Wood River one. It's patterned after an old Preston, and I actually sold my Nielsen when we got this, and I'll tell you the reason why. You see how this lever cap is hollowed out on the underside? These are a difficult tool to use to get accustomed to. You don't use it a whole lot, so it's not something you spend a lot of time with. But I can tuck those 3 fingers right up underneath there and squeeze the lever cap like that. Gives me a ton of control. On my Lee Nielsen, this was flat, and it was very difficult to hold on to. But by being able to put my fingers up into that recess, I got lots of control. I actually look down through this hole to see what's happening. I can watch the blade by looking down through there. It's shaped like this, so my thumb can lay there like that, pushing it forward. My index finger, pushes against the side to keep it tight to the tenon, and it gives you a lot more control. That's the reason why I like this. Also like the fact that the lever cap is down low. The other ones that are up a little bit higher, you're down behind the blade. I just find it very comfortable. A great old design, Preston's, and it was a good one to for woodcraft to pattern theirs after. All right, let's go back to the blade. Any shoulder plane questions?
Put the rabbiting block away.
No? Okay. Yeah, and this is not an appropriate shoulder plane, in case you're wondering. All right, block planes. There's your standard. There's your low angle. So if Jake can get a good shot like that. This one, if you pop up the lever cap, the blade, you'll notice, is sitting on the top. The bevel's sitting on the top, unlike a bench plane where the bevel's on the bottom. This is called your frog, and the bedding angle on the low angle is 12 degrees. When you're factoring in your actual angle that you're cutting, you have to take the bedding angle, which is 12, add the primary bevel, which is typically 25. Now you're at 37, and then factor in whatever secondary and tertiary bevel you have out there, which could easily be an extra 5 degrees. So you're actually planing at about 42 degrees, somewhere around 42. On the standard angle, the bedding angle is 20 degrees, considerably higher. So now you've got 20 plus 25, you're already at 45 degrees before you include any of the secondary bevel. So you could quite easily be in the 50 degree range, which is pretty high. The only disadvantage of that is the higher the angle of attack, the more effort is to push. But that's not necessarily the reason why I like this one. You'll notice that the lever cap is much lower, sits much lower on the low angle than it does on the standard angle. So when I hold that, that is not very comfortable at all. I'm sitting up on top of the plane. It's just not a comfortable option. This, being lower, is much more comfortable. And as pretty as they look, if they're not comfortable to use, you won't want to use them. So buy your low angle, not the standard angle. You can easily add a second blade with a higher primary bevel, and you can duplicate any advantage that higher pitch gives you on the standard angle. You can easily duplicate with a second blade on your low angle. This one has an adjustable throat, so you can open or close. That'll help you control tear out. That's pretty much a standard feature on block planes. Any questions on block planes?
No, I just asked, how do you avoid a tear out on the far edge when using the shoulder plane? Good question. So what I typically do, if you're going along there, I'll come in with my chisel and carefully come in and just make a little, this is a big cut, but make a little chamfer on that far side, just like you would if you were planing across the end of a board. Now you've got to follow your gauge line, so you're not going below it, but now you can go in there and make that cut without fearing that tear. That's a good question. And it's a problem that people face a lot. Questions on block planes? We move forward? Okay. Gauges. I actually would add a third gauge in there. But if you're cutting dovetails, and if you're doing it my new way where you use the offset, you really want 2 gauges minimum. That way you're not having to switch back and forth. You want to mark. I prefer my marking gauge to not have a free falling rod. The reason why I find the best way to measure the thickness is to set 1 gauge on there like that, drop that down, and then lock it. As long as that's flat on the end, that is going to give you the exact representation of the thickness of that piece. I like a large surface area. I much prefer the round style gauge as opposed to the older style. I like a adjuster knob that I can get enough torque on to really get that good and tight. And I want my cutter to be absolutely incredibly sharp. Especially on softer woods like pine, you want to go in there and you want those fibers to be severed, not crushed. Now this is my mortising gauge. And what's really nice is the way we sell them, you can buy just that.
Actually,
it's-
that's what you want.
Yes. Instead of buying a designated mortise and gauge, you can actually have this and just swap it out when you need to use your mortise and gauge. And that little device is used to go in there. I'll just show you this real quick. If you're going a 1/2 inch mortise, everything in a mortise and tenon joint is based off of your mortise chisel. So what you would do is you would open those cutters up, set the chisel in there, tighten it, come in here with a locking knob, tighten that up, and then when you remove it, that is the exact dimension of this, and you can go ahead and everything will reference off of that. Great. Paul Hayton up in Ontario helped me develop those. He's been backbone to a lot of the stuff that we make. Any questions on gauges? Quiet audience?
No, they're not. No.
Anybody there?
Yeah, it's our highest ever.
It is?
Yeah.
Has anybody beat Jim on this?
No. No.
Gorgeous. Well, Jim deserves it.
You should before the end of the episode explain it again, just in case anybody joined late. Danny's here now too, by the way.
Pardon?
Danny is here now too.
Danny is?
Yeah.
Danny Bell, he didn't hear my plug. Dan, you should see a big jump in your subscribers on your YouTube channel tonight. We told everybody about it, told them how good you are in front of the camera, and they need to sign up to your channel. I also told them what you're doing. By the way, I'm going to be at Dan's new store in January. We haven't set the date yet. Luther and I are both going to be there. We're going to do a workshop both Friday and Saturday, and Dan will give you all the details. But I know the admission price for any non-vet is they have to bring a vet with them. And a vet that comes needs to bring a combat wounded vet. We're going to do some Purple Heart stuff, but we're also going to teach dovetails and planing and all the rest of that. Help Dan kick off his business. All
Where
right.
is he?
Oh, huh?
Where is he?
Oh, he's in
Clarksville.
Tennessee. There's a song. Somebody sang a song about Clarksville, Tennessee, didn't they? The Beatles. There must be a Clarksville over there. The Monkees? Thank you. It was the Monkees. That was close. They were English, aren't they? There's Dan's. Tell you one more time. So, Planer's Edge. Find him on YouTube and sign up. So real quick, Sean Mahaffey, a friend of mine in Pennsylvania that does all of our resin impregnating for our mallet heads. I don't even have it here. It's out in the other room. I wanted to come up with a unique product that would just be ours, and he was going to do some black resin impregnating of maple. Unfortunately, when we did it, the black has pigment in it and it doesn't go all the way through the wood, and that's what we ended up with. Interesting enough looking as it is, but it wasn't jet black. He told me later, he said, you know, Rob, we've got purple, and the purple comes out beautifully. So this arrived this afternoon, and I went and made it for tonight because I thought, wow, this is gorgeous. So this is maple that is infused with purple resin. So it is resin impregnated. That goes all the way through it. The wood has been plasticized, so when you buff it up, it just feels absolutely gorgeous. But the color is just stunning. So what we're doing tonight, thanks to Frick, we're auctioning this off, and all of the proceeds, all of them, will go towards supporting one of the soldiers that we will host next year. The current bid is $1,000 from Jim O'Shaughnessy, who Jim took our class back in May. And if you want to beat him, you got to step up to the plate. Don't have much time. I'm almost done. Okay, two left. The next one is going to be the Skew block plane. Now this is a Lee Nielsen product. I think this is the best joinery plane you can get. There are other brands that make a Skew block. I prefer this. And somebody asked me, would you explain that tonight? I much prefer the look that Stanley developed in their planes. I just think there's something about their planes that just reeks of usability. I don't know what it is. I can't say it the way I'd like to, but that's a plane. There's some others that have tried with various designs that I think they just didn't hit the mark. This is a Lee Nielsen rendition of a 4.5, but just a gorgeous looking plane. Probably the reason why I like this one. I do like the fact that this has a fence. This was Tom Lee Nielsen's addition to the 140. The original Stanley did not have that. But by having that fence on there, and there's actually a fence on there's a side plate. I don't know if I still.
We do.
You know where it is?
Yeah, it's in
One of these.
that drawer
Huh?
or over here. We have Dave's sticking around.
I have Dave's.
Yeah, let's go.
Well, there it is right there. So that's the side plate that attaches to the side of the plane. I never use it, so that's why I couldn't even find it. But when you remove it, it exposes the blade. You'll also notice that the blade is on an angle. So when you're making a cut, now I use this frequently when I'm cutting dovetails. I'll demonstrate. There happens to be a marking gauge line already on there. So here's what I would do in order to get my little rabbet that I love to have on the inside of the tailboard. I use my marking gauge to cut to strike a line. I come in here. Now the way I set this up, I want that blade to be, I'm going to take this off first. I want the blade to be protruding from the side just enough. I don't want it flush. I want it sticking out a little bit. The blade needs to be parallel to the sole. So I'm going to loosen the spin wheel, advance the blade. I remove the fence so that I can get a better view. I can see the entire blade instead of just a little part that would be sticking out beyond the fence.
You're having to adjust the blade because we did a YouTube video today.
Right, on sharpening it. So if you want to see how to sharpen it, check that one out. I'm going to grab my little brass hammer and just tap that over. The nice thing about this is once you set it, with the exception of sharpening it once every 2 or 3 years, because it doesn't get that much, it gets used a lot, but it doesn't get used to cut a lot, if that makes any sense. Now that appears to be parallel to the sole. So I'm going to retract it a little bit because there's a little too much exposure. I'm going to lock it down. Don't over tighten that spin wheel. And I'm going to put the fence back on. Now these are some additions that we're going to have available soon. Jake's already making these auxiliary fences. When you buy the plane, it comes just with the steel portion. Well, that's not enough. You need extra fence to engage before the blade hits and keep the plane going in that direction after the blade exits. So that's why the additional piece. So you can get these now off of our site. Ahmed's going to supply us with these. Now, what I like about them is they're nicely knurled out of stainless steel and they are really sharp, which means you get a lot of torque. And the older your hands get and more arthritic you get, you really appreciate that.
Couple questions about the fence.
Yeah.
Are you going to do a video on it, how to make it? And what kind of wood is it?
It's maple. And there's going to be some fancy ones coming that will be in various exotic woods.
Do you sell them currently on the site?
Yeah, we sell these. Jake's been making them as fast as he can. So if I'm going to cut my rabbet on here, the first thing I'm going to do is adjust that fence until the point of that blade is right on that gauge line. Then I'll lock the fence. Now I've got a start, plane, and end all on the same plane. You don't want to tip. You want to keep this surface parallel to this surface even though it's going to be lower. Now what this hand is doing is twisting like this because I'm having to start my cut with nothing more for reference than that little pad right there. So I'm pushing in with my index finger against the fence. My thumb is holding pressure here to keep this from drooping down. The blade should engage as soon as I meet the wood and start to pull up a shaving. And because it's sharp and because it's cutting with that skew, it's your best bet in getting a smooth surface when cutting across the grain. If you tried to do this with a shoulder plane, the blade is cutting perpendicular to the grain, you're going to get a lot of tears. The danger in getting a torn surface is when you put your joint together, you're going to see that interaction with the second piece of wood and it'll show up as a bad joint. This does a lovely job on it. Takes a bit of a learning curve to get used to using it, but once you do, you're going to fall in love with it. You can also cut rabbets with it. So if you want a long, if you've got to cut a rabbet on the edge of a board, or even if you've got to go in and clean one up, you can go in there. You get caught up. I'm lower down here than I am back here. cut your rabbet, and then you would reference the two pieces. Great plane, love playing with it. It's one of my favorites. That's the Lee Nielsen Skew block plane. With the little additions, will make it even better tool. Okay, I think we're on number 10. Number 10 is the jointer. This is probably the most expensive individual tool that we have here, but it's also critical. And a lot of times folks don't understand what the purpose of a jointer is, so I'm going to compare it. I'll give you the best illustration I can. You have two tasks at hand. One is you got to flatten your bench top, and the second is you've got to prepare your coffee table. One needs to be beautifully smooth, the other needs to be perfectly flat. Why perfectly flat? It's your reference surface. Obviously I'm talking the bench being the one that has to be perfectly flat. The coffee table has to be nice and smooth. If you try to flatten your bench top with a plane like this, a bit of an exaggeration I know, but even the 5.5 or a 4.5, this plane will smooth it, but it will also follow any bumps, hills and valleys on your surface. It's not going to go in there and do a very good job flattening. In fact, I don't have the skill to flatten a bench with a 4.5, if that's any kind of a reference for you. This plane, however, with its 22-inch long sole, will reference off the high spots and help you bring it all down to one level. Doesn't do it on its own. It still requires skill, but far less skill to flatten something with this than with this. Now, why wouldn't you want to use this on your coffee table? Well, let's say your coffee table is 3/4 inch stock and you've got some kind of edge treatment on there which is going to leave a little lip all the way around that should be uniform thickness. But in the process of trying to flatten this or smooth this coffee table top, it's out of flat just enough that by using this plane you actually end up taking a 1/16 more off of one side than the other. Are you going to notice a 1/16 of an inch on a 3/4 inch edge? Absolutely will. In that case, you want to come in and ignore any slight changes in elevation, if you want to call it that. Use your smoother, not your jointer. Jointer is for flattening, smoothing is for smoothing. That's the case for having a jointer. So if you're going to work wood with hand tools, you need to have the big jointer. That's my top 10. And I realize these three count as one, those two count as one, so we'll call them top 10 categories, maybe a better way to state it. What additional tools would I throw in there? They're under $100. As I mentioned, you need a good mallet. You need, I actually had it written down. Let me see if I can catch my notes so I don't forget something. There's not that much extra.
Fretsaw dividers.
Yeah, Fretsaw.
Combination.
Actually, I got a few extra things I want to add to. If you're doing dovetails, you're going to need dividers. You're going to need a dovetail marker. You're going to want the dovetail marking knife. You're going to want a palette knife for spreading the glue. But these are all relatively inexpensive tools that you're going to find a use for. I didn't have room, obviously, in the top 10, so I'm going to add a couple things. A really close number 11. Guess we already, what did we give number 11 credit for? Oh, bench grinder. It's not a hand tool. This is a router plane. This is probably one of the most accurate tools. You can get half a thou with this. Great tool for doing very accurate work, particularly on setting the thickness of a tenon. I don't have time to demonstrate it, but that's something. And I much prefer the Lee Nielsen. There's other brands. Let me show you the advantage of the Lee Nielsen. The blade is square. The shank is square. It fits in a square hole. When you tighten it, this screw, as you can see, pushes on that corner, which drives those two corners in and makes it very tight. There's others out there that are round. You hit something hard and the blade will twist on you. It will not happen with the Lee Nielsen. This is the choice. Where's my notes? Scraper. I always prefer, in fact, I can't think of a domestic hardwood that I'd have to scrape that I couldn't plane. You step into the exotics, now you're going to have to, there's going to be some that just will not plane, you have to scrape them. So you really have two options. This is the number 112 and this is the 85. And it's a hard decision because the advantage of the 85 is you have that capacity to go right into a vertical surface. The advantage of the 112 is you've got a big wide surface, so tough call. If I was forced to choose, I would probably take this one because this can do what that will do. This cannot do what this one will do,
based on what I just told you. So I'm going to leave this one out. If that was 11, that's 12, that's 13, 14. Combination square. Okay. 14 would be your combination square. And you're going to need squares, obviously, but again, that's a less expensive tool. But I do like my combination square. I usually use my 6-inch. It's in the other room. But being able to mark out a perfect miter, this is a great device, and it's made by PEC. Not half, but far less than a Starett, but just as accurate. Made in California. We carry their whole line of marking tools, and we've had great success with them. Really good tools. One of the best finds I've had in a long time. The other thing I was going to tell you that clamps. Yeah. Oh, you know what, Ken? Would you grab me that clamp that I got to give credit to Bessie for that place. Clamps are something that don't cost $100. They cost more like about $100,000 by the time you get all the ones you want. But fortunately, you can just buy them 1 and 2 at a time. If you're going to buy them, buy the Bessie Tradesman. They're the best clamp out there. They have a lower quality brand. Stay away from it. You want the Tradesman brand. Now, I contacted Bessie. The fellow who's in charge of Bessie for Canada, I've known quite a long time. I see him at the wood shows, and I happened to have a conversation with him, and he knew what I was doing with the Purple Heart project, and he said, Rob, if I can do anything to help, just let me know. And I said, you know what would be really nice if we could send each one of these guys home with a little kit of clamps. And he said, no problem at all. So he sent us 14 clamp kits. I'm going to show you them. It's on its way. Unfortunately, they arrived late for the first class, but we're going to mail them to them. But we have the guys in the last class got theirs. Thank you. So here's what every one of the vets got. Really nice tote bag, by the way. I don't know how many hundreds of dollars worth of clamps are in here, but it was substantial. Those cutters, I don't know why they made it in there, but they're really nice. This is their new gear clamp, which is really cool. It allows you to tighten something you can get into a tight spot, because instead of your clamp handle being out here, it's back here. And it's got a worm gear in there, so as you turn that, it advances it. And of course, you can adjust it right here. There's 2 of these in here, Jake? So 2 of those. And these are, I asked them specifically, these are the tradesmen. There's 2 of those, and there's 2 of these longer ones. So wasn't that a nice gesture of Bessie? So we are out buying clamps. Think about what they did to help support our Purple Heart project. I hope you give them your business. The next time you're at a wood show and you see anybody from Bessie, just extend a thank you to them. Really nice. So clamps, you'll be buying clamps until the day you die. But get the good ones. Get the good ones. And I'll end this session by just showing you the difference. I forgot to do this. So here's an example. These are approximately the same size clamps. This is the good one. So on the good one, the bar has 1, 2, 3 serrated surfaces on this side and 3 on that side. And those surfaces are what help the clamp to grab as you put it into position. The cheap ones have 1 serrated surface there and 1 there. And they tend to not grab very well, and they slip on you. And the other big difference is, you see the cup right here, a solid piece. Do you see what it's like on this one? That actually it's got a plastic cap on there, which I always throw them away anyway, and then it ends up leaving a mark. This is a far better system, better threads, just 10 times the clamp. I wouldn't have bought those, but I didn't pay attention. I got home and I realized, shoot, that's not what I want. So you want the tradesman. Okay, I think we got everything covered. Everything covered that I wanted to. Is there any questions?
They were asking what brand of square you recommend.
PEC.
Yeah.
We found PEC. I'll give you a quick example. Oh, where's my... This is, I have a Starett 12-inch. Megan, can you grab me that Starett 12. Ken, would you run and grab me the 12-inch Starett that's on the display?
PEC.
PEC, sorry. So there's a Starett 12-inch solid steel square. What's the price, Jake? 700?
690.
$690 for that square. I bought it used. I didn't spend that kind of money, but it was enough. Great square. Beautiful. Comes in handy. PEC, their 12-inch square, no, 12-inch steel square. The big one. Their square, we checked it. We put it up against this one with a 1 thou shim, and you couldn't pull the shim out anywhere. And the price is
I think it's 110 or 110.
somewhere around $100. 100 versus 700. And if you need greater accuracy than that, well, there's the PEC. Okay, 700, 100. So that's my brand. That's my choice for squares. And they have squares from the little one, which everybody needs in their apron. Especially when you're cutting dovetails, we use that to make sure that the socket between the pins is nice and flat. You lay it over to the side, make sure that the side of your pin is standing plumb. That's a great little square. So we have them in 2, 3, 4, 6, 9, and 12-inch squares. If you have a combination of squares, we carry them in the 12-inch and the 6-inch. What else is there? Oh, the straight edges. That's at 18, 12, and the 6. We carry that. It's a great brand. They're good folks to deal with, and they have the accuracy without paying an arm and a leg. So that's my recommendation.
3 things. First of all, Pete is on now.
Pete,
So is Kevin.
And so is
Kevin.
we had a Kenton O'Donnell buy a T-shirt,
Thank you, Kenton.
and the bid is growing.
The bid is growing.
1380 we're at.
Show
1380.
the saw again.
All right. So first of all, I have to tell you a quick story.
Pete's board is over.
Huh?
Pete's board is over.
Pete's board? Yeah. So this is Pete's dovetail.
Inverted.
Inverted dovetail. We haven't quite figured it out yet, but Pete had a great time. Pete was one of the success stories that really warms our heart, and it's the reason we do this. He couldn't figure out at the beginning why we strangers would do something like this for him.
Canadian stranger.
Canadian strangers make it even worse. Pete is a Vietnam vet. He also served in the first Iraq War, and he turned a corner. He's still working on his dovetails. He promised me a good dovetail before he dies, but he went from being somewhat of a recluse in the class to being the life of the party. He had us laughing and crying at the same time. And Pete, thank you. We will think about you, remember you fondly for as long as we're around. And you heard Kevin may just come on, but Kevin, I figured you put it on our public forum so it was able to tell it to everybody. But I told Kevin's story, and Kevin was another success story. The reason why we do this, and why we will continue to do this. Go on to our website, go underneath the reviews section on the workshops, and read Kevin's story if you missed it when Megan read it, or Frick read it earlier. But we owe these guys everything that we can possibly do for them. And if there's something we can do to alleviate some of their pain and make life a little more bearable, then by all means, join me and help me do it. Let's reach as many of them as we possibly can. Kevin's coming up. Kevin's going to be at the wood show with us. We have a wood show to do in Ancaster, Ontario. So the the Hamilton show that used to be held in February at the old airplane museum, not the old, but the airplane museum, we've outgrown. So they've moved it to Ancaster. It's going to be November 7, 8, and 9, or 8, 9, 10. Something like that, 8, 9, and 10. Kevin's coming up with us. He'll be there so you can shake his hand and thank him. Super Dave will be there as well. And Jake and I will be there. Luther's not going to be there until, he might get permission. Never know. Could be a surprise visit.
1,500 for the saw.
1,500. So this beautiful, and Pete, you didn't see, if you just came on late, this is a new purple infused resin impregnated
maple handle. Isn't that gorgeous, that color? And that's as close to the actual purple of the Purple Heart. Look at that. So I just made this one this afternoon.
And
And
there's no oxidation.
yeah, right, there's no oxidation. Oh, good point, Jake. Purple Heart will oxidize. This won't. And it's all the way through it. And it feels absolutely fantastic. So Frick decided we should auction it off. And the goal was, could we raise $3,000 and cover one of our vets coming next year with the sale of one saw? That would be fantastic. But we're working towards it. Where are we now?
1510.
$1,510. So we've got that vet halfway here. Actually, we got him here. We just haven't been able to give him his tools yet because the total price package is $3,000. Anything you see, any questions you want to ask? I'll stay on here as long as we need to, as long as we're raising money for this cause.
It's between Jim and David Lynn, and David's winning currently 1525.
Somebody asked if you can ship PEC squares into the States.
Yes, we can sell anything. We ship tools anywhere in the world. The only exception is Wood River Plains. We do not send them into the U.S. Anything else? Absolutely. We are an international company. In fact, we probably send more to foreign countries. We send a heck of a lot more to foreign countries than we send to our own country of Canada. Any other questions relating, any other hellos or questions relating to hand tools?
When
Actually,
are you going to be in Florida?
we're going to be in Florida in March.
February and March.
February, March, we'll be at both the Tampa store, which is actually in Clearwater, and we'll be at the store in Orlando. We haven't nailed down dates for either one of them yet, but we will be there. And we will do a designated workshop just for combat wounded vets, actually any vet, sorry, on one day in each store. And that'll be, of course, no charge.
Jake, show this delicious smoked salmon I just
David,
made.
that's been bidding, says tell Rob hi from Reading, Cal.
Oh, David, that's David Lynn. Who's that?
Which workshop?
He's in there.
at that color.
Tell us, David. And hello. You're up against Jim. I can't believe Jim's going to let this go. He's probably not.
No, I think Jim's winning currently.
Oh, Jim's winning. Now we need a sniper to come in and really bump it up.
1550 is the current.
1550. Anything else here that you want to talk about? You got my attention.
Was Jake going to make a high angle blade?
Pardon?
Jim wants to know if Jake was going to make a high angle blade.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're going to add that to our list too. You can go from here and you can just keep expanding. And what will happen is as you start working wood, you realize that you get into a certain circumstance where I need something a little bit better. What they're talking about is instead
No,
of putting...
what they're talking about is I'm supposed to make one for Jim.
Right. But a high angle blade is, we make a blade, actually the one I got out earlier was, this is it.
No, the 2 5/8.
This one. So what we've done, instead of changing the frog, some companies will sell you a second frog, which is usually $85, $90. You take it out, put it in, and it holds the blade up higher. But you can achieve the same result by doing this. What we've done is we went in and we created about a 2 millimeter wide back bevel at 20 degrees. Can you see the angle? Can you see it close enough to see it?
Yeah.
So when you have that parked in your plane, held at 45 degrees, and now you calculate your actual angle of attack or your planing angle. You've got your 45 degree bedding angle, but then up here you've got an additional 20, so you're planing at 65 degrees. The advantage of that is it's extremely good on highly figured woods that tend to tear. The downside is, as you increase the pitch, it gets a whole lot harder to push. So the reason I don't always have that in my plane is for that reason. I don't need all that extra effort. But when you do need it, it's nice to simply have one blade. We'll sell it with the blade and the chip breaker already prepared, so you just leave it in your tool tray when you need it. Put it in your plane.
We do sell.
We do already make them? No, sorry, I'm behind the times. We do already have them. Then how come Jim's, are you just behind on it?
Yeah.
All right, I
Work,
think
get to
that's.
work, Jake.
I think Jim is our winner.
Jim is?
Yeah.
Are we declaring that?
Yeah, it looks like David's conceded. So, but thank you to both of them
You
for.
fought a good fight, David. You fought a good fight. Thank you, Jim. I tip my hat to you, brother.
You know the cause. Jim's
Never
been
mind.
there. He's been there with us.
No, David just bid 1600.
David's back in.
Not going down without a fight.
Was it something I said? Jim, are you there?
We got to put a time limit on this. We're almost at 2 hours.
What did David
Just
say?
somebody bid 3,000 and we'll call it quits right there, and that'll cover. What's that? 2,000? Well, Megan, you have to speak up. I can't understand your sign language. Can we throw something in to make it more interesting?
Jim says yes, but I don't know what he's saying yes to.
Oh, it says not yet. Go, Dave. Dave wins. Thanks, Rob and team. You guys are amazing. Yes.
Oh. Okay, so here's Megan's off. Why did you just say that out loud? You can say
No,
whatever
she
you
doesn't wanna
want in
say that
here.
out loud and then you reject it.
No, I wouldn't reject it. So I'll make you an offer. If you both want one of these saws, and this will get us our 3,000, I will make a second one. And it'll be just as pretty. And you both get to take one home, and we will bring one vet in, compliments of you two gentlemen. Just give us a nod, and that'll go.
Say yes.
And Ken will hold my feet to the fire to make sure it gets done this week.
That's right, I will.
There was a skip.
Is that a go?
Haven't
Jim
heard
says
from.
there's a skip in the broadcast.
The what? There's a skip in the broadcast?
Yes, from Jim. So Jim agrees.
Jim agrees. David, we just need your final approval, and that's what we'll
And
do,
that-
and we will have met.
That'll lower each bid to 1,500.
Yeah, David
Yeah.
bid 1600, so it'll bring it down to 15, and Jim the same price.
Tell me when we have the word.
Ahmed says he'll throw in a purple heart handle now.
Med says he'll throw in a purple heart. Maybe we should put this back up. You're a good man, Ahmed. I don't care what Luther says.
So have they both agreed?
Well, David had the highest bid, and then Jim said yes, so I'm assuming.
Okay.
Yeah,
he'd say
David
yes.
just said I was in Rob's class 2 years ago. Okay on the 1500s, so we're good.
Okay, good.
All right.
Thank you, gentlemen. Round of applause for you both. So that's great. This is the first time this has ever happened. We've raised enough in one broadcast to cover the total cost of bringing one vet to a workshop next year. That is awesome, and this is not the last time we're going to do it. I appreciate your support more than you will ever know. Thank you. Thank you to any of the vets that are on there, and thank you to the vets that we've had. Kevin, was there anywhere besides Kevin and Pete? Anybody else speak up?
Yeah, we had a few
Yeah,
through.
we had a bunch.
Now
Yeah.
you're supposed to tell them to me.
Oh,
There's just so many.
Well, that doesn't matter,
You
right?
guys.
Like just the vets. Or people
Any
from
combat
classes.
wounded vet that's been in our class that mentions it, I want to say hi
Dan's
to them.
been on.
Well, Dan was
Bob's
there.
on.
Who?
Bob.
Bob's there, yeah.
Bob Abbott?
Yes.
He was late, but
Late, Bob? Seriously? Late? Anyway, thank you, folks. Appreciate your support. We'll see you in another couple of weeks. We'll have something else interesting. We're always open to suggestions, too. Thanks to everybody behind the cameras that's been helping us put this together. And thanks to Ken's grandson, whose name is? Luke. Thank you, Luke. He's been keeping us up to date on the bids. Gentlemen, I'll have your
Gary.
I'll have your
Gary's
saws
here.
in the mail to you the first of the week. Have a good night, you guys.
Gary's here. Gary.
Oh yeah, Gary Burnett.
Oh, Gary.